Some mysteries are buried by time. Others are deliberately hidden, but the most haunting are those that simply vanish into thin air, leaving behind only silence and a single, unanswerable question. In 1943, at the height of the Second World War, a skilled American pilot disappeared without a trace over the English Channel. For 60 years, his fate remained a ghost story, a footnote in the casualty lists of a global conflict. But when his younger brother refused to let the silence win, he began a lifelong search that would uncover a truth more shocking and more profound than any military report could ever contain. A truth that would forever change how history remembers the man who fell from the sky. "You won't believe what my compass just did. It swung nearly 30 degrees for no reason." Those were among the final routine words of Lieutenant Raymond Gaines, overheard on June 7, 1943. At 28, Gaines was one of the most precise reconnaissance pilots in his unit. His mission was simple: fly his P-38 Lightning solo on a classified photo run over occupied France. Weather was clear, flight plans were standard, it wasn't even a combat sortie. Yet, by 10:30 a.m., Raymond Gaines and his aircraft had vanished. A massive air-sea search was launched within hours. RAF units scanned the channel for wreckage, an oil slick, a signal flare, anything. There was nothing. The only clue came from another pilot, Lieutenant Samuel Drake, who reported seeing Gaines's aircraft veer sharply southeast, away from its flight path, before diving into a thick bank of clouds. It made no sense. By June 10th, the official verdict was delivered in a cold internal memo: missing in action, presumed lost at sea. An aircraft and a man, swallowed by the silence of the war. But for one person, the story wasn't over. At home in Omaha, Nebraska, Raymond's 17-year-old brother Walter couldn't accept it. He knew Ray. His brother was meticulous, a man who always had a backup plan. In a letter mailed just 2 days before the mission, Ray had written, "I feel something off, just mechanical stuff. I'll write more soon." No second letter ever came. Only a chest of personal effects, containing 2 logbooks. In one, the page for his final flight was torn out. For Walter Gaines, this wasn't an ending. It was the first clue in a 60-year investigation. Life moved on. Walter Gaines became a respected aircraft engineer, married and raised a family. But the ghost of his brother never left him. It wasn't grief that fueled him. It was a cold, logical frustration. Every year on June 7th, he would open that chest, studying the artifacts of his brother's life. Then, in 1973, 3 decades after the disappearance, came the first crack in the case. While repairing a World War II-era instrument, Walter remembered Ray's note about mechanical stuff. He revisited the logbook, focusing on the entry from June 5th, 2 days before the final flight. It read, "Third flight with temporary nav unit installed. Interference increasing at altitude above 5,000 feet. Altimeter jumps sporadically. Might be faulty wiring or field disruption." Field disruption. That wasn't just a faulty cable. This was something external, an environmental force. Walter cross-referenced the flight path. That test flight had been near the French coast, close to where Raymond vanished. He was testing experimental equipment. Posing as a historical writer, Walter contacted the RAF archives. A sympathetic clerk mailed him a single, unclassified maintenance slip. It documented a temporary compass swap on Raymond's P-38, model MTX-13, installed June 4th. The MTX-13 was a prototype, rumored to have a critical design flaw. It malfunctioned catastrophically near powerful magnetic fields. Most were scrapped by 1944. Raymond had flown with it. Walter's research led him to obscure aviation newsletters, which mentioned anomalous radar echoes and natural geomagnetic hotspots near the French coastal town of Le Tréport during the war. Suddenly, the official story crumbled. Raymond hadn't made a pilot error. His instruments had lied to him, likely pulling him off course over occupied France, directly into a known magnetic anomaly.
But the most earth-shattering clue arrived in 1981. A letter from a former RAF technician who had found old, static-filled radio logs. One contained a partially deciphered distress signal from June 1943. Buried in the noise were a few seconds of Raymond's voice and a set of coordinates. Walter froze. Raymond hadn't crashed into the sea. He landed. He was alive. The coordinates pointed to a patch of dense woodland near Le Tréport, deep inside German-occupied territory. He had been completely cut off. Walter took his findings to Dr. Helen Barrett, a historian specializing in lost World War II aircraft. Skeptical at first, her tone changed when she saw the logbook, the maintenance slip, and the audio recording. Together, they found a 1963 French topographic map of the area. Near the coordinates, a shallow depression was annotated with a simple, tantalizing note. Ferraille souterraine. Scrap metal underground. It had been noted but never investigated. For another 2 decades the mystery lay dormant, buried under French soil and bureaucracy. But by 2003, technology had finally caught up with Walter's obsession. Now 77, he flew to France with Dr. Barrett and a team armed with portable ground-penetrating radar. Within hours, the GPR unit painted a picture beneath the forest floor. A large metallic shape, 20 feet wide, with a narrow, split nose. The unmistakable outline of a P-38 Lightning. The excavation began in early 2004. First, riveted aluminum. Then, blackened paint with U.S. Army Air Force's markings. Finally, the serial number on the tail. 41-6275-G. It was a perfect match. They had found his plane. But then came the next twist. The cockpit canopy was open. And it was empty. No human remains, no flight gear, no bones. It was as if Raymond Gaines had simply gotten out and walked away. That evening, they found it. Tucked behind the pilot's seat was a sealed canister, still intact. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a single, handwritten letter. If someone finds this, I survived. Engine took damage, landed hard near forest. Compass useless. Heading for high ground. Cliffs to signal with mirror. May reach Allied line. If not, I tried. Lieutenant Raymond Gaines. Raymond hadn't died in the crash. He was a survivor, fighting his way through enemy territory. The discovery made headlines, but the real story was hidden in dusty regional archives. Dr. Barrett unearthed a 1945 debrief of a French villager who recalled sheltering an injured American pilot in the summer of 1943. He spoke of landing his plane in the forest. Another Allied intelligence file noted an intercepted German report from July 1943. Suspicion of Allied pilot spotted near Fécamp. Subject disappeared. He was a ghost, moving through the shadows of occupied France. The trail led to the towering cliffs of Étretat, where a French team later found American initials faintly scratched into a stone wall. RG-7/43. He had reached the coast, just as his letter said he would. But there, the trail went cold, and for years it was assumed he was captured or killed in his final attempt to signal for help. A ceremony was held in Le Tréport. Walter, now nearing 90, attended with his granddaughter, Emily. He had found his brother, not in a watery grave, but in a story of incredible courage. Before he passed away peacefully months later, he left a note for Emily. He wasn't a mystery, it read. He was just trying to come home.
Emily, a journalist, picked up the trail her grand-uncle had blazed. She published Raymond's story, believing it was complete. She was wrong. 2 months later, an email arrived from an elderly historian in Canada. Attached were scanned pages from a wartime refugee intake ledger from Halifax, dated October 1944. One entry stood out. A man named Richard Gray, an American who arrived via merchant vessel from France. No known family. The handwriting, especially the curled G, was a near-perfect match for Raymond Gaines's letters.
Emily's pulse raced. Halifax archives revealed that Richard Gray enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force Reserves, serving not as a pilot, but as a ground instructor. He trained young recruits, his knowledge of navigation and field improvisation seemingly innate. After the war, his file stated he was released without request for repatriation. Why would a hero who fought so hard to survive not go home? The answer was found in a bundle of letters Richard Gray had written to a local pastor in 1947, preserved in a Canadian aviation museum. I have learned that I was once declared missing, presumed dead. To reveal myself now would cause only confusion and pain. Families have made their peace. Brothers have grieved. I cannot ask them to relive that loss. My duty is to serve where I am needed, and to leave no burden behind. It wasn't cowardice. It was a final, silent sacrifice. He chose to let his loved ones keep their closure, rather than shatter their world with his return. He lived as Richard Gray until 1957, passing away quietly from an illness. No one ever knew he was Lieutenant Raymond Gaines, the pilot who vanished. Standing at a ceremony where a new dual plaque was unveiled, Emily finally understood. Lieutenant Raymond Gaines, alias Richard Gray. A pilot who vanished. A survivor who served in silence. Her granduncle had written that Raymond was just trying to come home, and in a way, he did. Not to the house he left behind, but to a life of purpose, lived on his own terms. His story reminds us that the fog of war hides more than just wreckage. It hides sacrifice, resilience, and heroes who never receive a medal. Real heroes don't always go down in flames. Some just keep walking. Their greatest battle fought not in the skies, but in the quiet chambers of the human heart.